I'm going to show how to make the cell noise pattern using Affinity Photo's Procedural Texture Filter. To get started, I'm going to start with a new document. I'm going to make it 1024 by 1024. I'm going to fill it with black, and then go to Live Filters and add a new Procedural Texture Filter. Go down at the bottom. I'm going to add a new equation. To get started, I'm going to start with a variable. This will be, I'll just call it v, and this will be for the coordinates. It's going to be a 2 vector, so vec2 with rx, relative x, and relative y coordinates for the x and y coordinates of the pixels. And then I'll scale those by factor a that I'm going to have as a custom input, and divide by w, which is the width of the document in pixels. And just to show what that looks like, I'll put v here, and I'll apply that to all three color channels. And then I'll add my a down here as a real input, and this will control the scale of the image. Next thing I'm going to do is to use the cell noise dist, the distance cell noise function, and I like this one a lot because if you look at the other cell noise functions and you take sort of a section of them, you get a bunch of dots, which is fine if you want circles, but for this one I want to have sort of the shape of the outline of the cells, so that's why I like this one better. The cell noise requires both an x and a y input, so to get those out of my vector I have to access them with v.x, v.y. And then I need a parameter to show how much randomness is included, and I'll use that as b as a custom input. So take a look at that. I'll add a b factor here, and there you can see with b0 it's just a rectangular array or a square grid, and then as you bring this up and you get more randomness involved. I could add a slider, I'll call it I, and multiply my b times I, and that way I can see how it changes going from uniform to more and more randomness. I'll just take that off for now. I'm going to set this as a variable, so I'll make a variable, call it t1, and I'm going to assign it to that. And then I put a semicolon and type t1, and now it just looks the same, but it's set up as a variable here. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to quantize this. So I'm going to type in quantize, and I'm going to use a custom input c here, but I'm going to use 1 over c. So when you use the quantize function, it's going to take this smooth transition and divide it into a number of steps. But as the number of steps will be given by the fraction here. If I wanted 10 steps between 0 and 1, I would use 0.1 for the input, for the first input to this function. I'd rather use a real number, and then that will tell me how many steps I want. So I'm going to add in a real number, I'll call it c, and that will tell me how many steps I'm going to have in that function. So now I can see they're starting to come in, and I can see the stripes or the lines of that cell noise function coming in. The cell noise is not very bright. Yeah, I can see it doesn't go all the way up to white. It's nice and black. So I'd like to have some more controls on that. So I'm going to multiply this by another factor. I think I'll multiply it by 4, but then multiply that by a slider so I can adjust that. And then I'm going to add an offset. I'll call that OF. I'm going to add 2 more variables. First one will be a 0 to 1 custom input. I'll call that one I. And the second one I'll just make it go from -1 to 1. And I'll call that OF. Okay, now I can scale this until I get it just where I want it, or I can adjust this point where it changes black, like that. Now I can adjust the steps, like that. So I'll just leave this at 10. Now the next part will be to add an adjustment, and I'm going to add a gradient map. I'll just use the default one. Go over to layers and drag that down on top of this. And now I've got the gradient map, the procedural texture, all set up as a layer. We're going to modify this a little bit. Put some green down here by the red, maybe make it a little bit darker. Then I'm going to have a maybe something a little different, like a yellow. And over here, I'll put in a violet. So I'm trying to go for sort of a complementary contrast look here. And I'll also have some color contrast. And then switch over to another color, and I'll just do sort of an orange. And then blue. That's the basic pattern. If I wanted to do some more with this, I could go to Layer, Merge Visible, and then go to Filter, Distort, Mirror. Bring this up. Make a mirror pattern. Change the inputs or the outputs. The position of the mirror that you're sort of sampling from for the symmetry. And then the output just shows how you rotate it afterwards. So I'll just leave this one at 0. And then I can just adjust this one until I find a section of the original image that gives me a good pattern on the output. And then just apply that, and I've got a new pattern there. There's the original. Here's the new one. Okay, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.